thriving township on the Eastern Downs played host to the Queensland Motorcycle Enduro Championship of 1973, better known as the Great Dividing Run. The township itself is set amidst rich black soil flats and displays none of the hardships that the 86 riders were to face on that eventful Sunday. To stage this event, the time and cooperation of many club members were needed to mark out the route, effectively man the controls and special sections, and do the many incidental jobs before and on the days of the event. The route had initially been plotted from the air, with Enduro committee members straining their eyeballs looking for new tracks, ascents and descents over the many razorback ridges and valleys branching off the Great Divide. Following this, many weekends were spent threading into the Enduro every possible type of terrain, from high-speed roadwork to tricky mountain maneuvering. Let's join Bob, Gordon and Terry now as they continue marking out the western loop of the morning section. Part of the morning loop passes by disused gold mines in the Patton area. Although the boys took time off to investigate these old diggings, competitors on the day would hardly have time to notice their existence. Gold is still found here, but not in enough quantity to mine commercially. After the deep, sandy, rutted tracks of Patton and the fast, rocky hills of Mount Gammy Timber Reserve, the western loop eventually reached the Condamine River. By this time, Bob and Terry decided it was time for a much-needed cool-off. Meanwhile, in the eastern loop of the morning section, which traversed rugged trackless country of the slopes of the Great Divide, a second team of club members stapled up miles of tape to mark out the route. Elsewhere in the event, little yellow markers acted as guardian angels to make sure riders kept to the correct track. Here we see Hubert standing at the conference table negotiating with a horde of angry landowners for the use of their property during the day. Wise competitors began arriving from all points of the compass, from as far away as Sydney in the south, St. George in the west, Maryborough in the north, and the Pacific Ocean in the east, early the day before to allow tons of time for last-minute panic preparations and setting up camp to get a good night's sleep. Weigh-in time began at dark, and each machine was given a complete physical examination, and riders were asked to cough. As each machine passed its testing, it was then impounded for the night. At this time, riders were given their route sheets and last-minute instructions. Last briefing session, Trailblazer was just itching to get to bed, and Zeno was his usual wide-awake self. Breakfast bell at 5 o'clock next morning in conjunction with an additional feature of the day, the Toowoomba Motorcycle Club Breakfast Fashion Parade. And Jacqueline modelled the latest in matching KTM shirts. Claudia features the latest in bust-away elbows. Bob Morgan enjoys a gourmet breakfast. Riders began to assemble themselves for the off at 7 o'clock. Many different machines came forward to the line. Hondas, Pentons, Osses, Yamahas, Suzukis, Bultacos, Kawasaki's and Montestas were all represented. Winner for 1980 fires up her beastie and gives a demonstration run around the paddock. begins to rise. Final times are checked. Away go Alan Bird and David Stoneman, racing off to the first corner. Wheeling and broadsiding, crashing and tearing. Georgina Reeves upholds the flags for the ladies. Riders follow in suit, leaving in pairs at minute intervals. The fun began within a mile of the start. A short pass under the railway to carry the riders away from the still sleeping townspeople.
Ah, you mug. You didn't have to go to the water. Unless you needed a bath.
Already, a few of the bikes had hydrophobia and needed a good toweling down before pressing on. About 20 miles past the water crossing, the route led through some sandy, grassy forest country. Most riders approached this section with less than expert. Brinker shows the right way to ride sand, fast and a bit furious. They show varying styles, anything from vertical to horizontal. This section lasted for approximately 5 miles, so many of the riders by this time were becoming a little bit fatigued. And the field, instead of riding a pair of riders every minute, was beginning to become bunched up. Rider Cole McLeod struck a minor difficulty. He lost one axle nut, and he took a walk back through the sand to see if he could find it. Unfortunately, the nut held the back wheel to his bike, and he retired for the day. Straight after the sand section came a control point, and here it is. As riders arrived at this unexpectedly, several had to throw their mounts down on the gravel. John Irvine, number 39A, arrived in good order. Finds the check sheet for Terry Shireen and blast off again several minutes behind schedule. In this section were some fast gravel roads to assist the riders to regain their time before arriving at the Condamine River. Condamine River crossing was a bit of a surprise to many riders because of its depth. At the briefing, all riders were told that the water would be approximately 18 inches deep, and several of the early riders rode into the water and were horrified to find the water up over their front wheels, completely hiding it. And some of the riders even dropped their machines right in the water and completely hid themselves as well as the machines. The remarks heard here would have burned up the tape recorder, as some of the riders were ill prepared for the situation and spent as much as an hour drying themselves out afterwards. Some went through and dried out their machinery only to find that 50 yards away they had to recross the river again and had to repeat the process all over again. When later numbers arrived at the crossing and saw the situation, many riders formed up in teams to ferry each other across the river and bodily carry the machines across the deeper parts. This is entirely legal and within the rules of the run, as long as no outside assistance was given to the riders from members not actually entered. Except for heavy rain the day before the event, this river crossing would have been much easier. One rider seems to be consoling himself for his ill fortune.
Maybe if I just close my eyes, this nightmare will go away.
Finally, out of the river and back on the gravel roads, and then most of the riders headed for the first BP petrol stop. Several, notably Winston Stokes on his KTM, struck chain trouble this time and had to begin mechanical repairs. A disastrous situation because it takes so much time and puts them so late on the run. Arriving at the fuel stop, a welcome sight of much-needed petrol and a few minutes rest. 10 minutes we allowed at this stop. Now the route carried the riders up to the great dividing range itself. And just on the edge, there was a long, clear paddock with a series of contour banks. And here we see the riders, some cautiously and some incautiously, approaching these banks and crossing them. Note the wonderful styles of some of the riders as they land front wheel down. These particular scenes were taken by Alan Barrelett lying on his stomach beside his machine after one of the contour banks, and many riders pulled up to see how badly injured he had been when he pranged. Once again, a little further into the hills, the route started to go up further on the Great Divide over a rocky and very punishing track. Riding here is not easy at the best of times, and when you're trying to ride the schedule, it becomes even tougher. Several A-grade riders actually retired on the hill and cried quits.
Oh, but gee, doesn't time fly when you're having fun?
Four or 5 miles along the top of the divide, crashing and banging over rocks and roots, came the coup de grace of the event, with a very steep downhill run along the side of a ridge. Movies do not do justice to the steepness of this hill, as it was actually much harder than would appear. Immediately after this came the welcome respite of lunch, and an hour and a few minutes here for riders to catch their wind and to get their energy back. Also, of course, petrol was required at this time for the afternoon route, and once again, BP Motor Spirit to the rescue. Straight after lunch was a special section. This consisted of approximately 1/2 mile of rocky stream bed covered with slimy moss and slippery algae. Times in this section were taken, and in case of a tie, the fastest time through this section and the acceleration and braking test at the end of the day determined the winner. Fastest time through this section was put up by Ian Denton on a trial Yamaha, which is normally considered an ideal low-speed machine. But as anyone can see, this wasn't a particularly fast section with no riders getting into top gear. of spectators, thousands? Well, hundreds of spectators lined the route to encourage the riders. Here is Ian Denton, now showing the way to ride over rocks. There came a pleasant little loop through forestry country, and then back along faster gravel roads through the countryside, wending back towards the finish, which was again at Clifton. Hard competitors were seen taking the slow average on foot. The event was finished with the final special test, which involved 1/4 mile acceleration on gravel road and a 180-degree turn at the finish. And the time was taken when the rider was parked and stopped in the special parking bay. Some interesting approaches were taken. Had a rather interesting approach to this, deciding just to be different. A much-needed beer cure was then organised for competitors and officials to refresh muscles and bones and stomachs and ears and seats. Many riders struck camp and loaded up their bikes while they still had some energy. No easy task with some bikes and trailers. Finally, the long-awaited moment, presentation of awards. Ken List of Gatton collects the Lightweight Award. Brian Foster wins the over 350cc award. And a jubilant Chris Roberts from Orange, New South Wales, the unlimited outright winner of the day. Chris says, be sure to keep a number for him in our 1974 event 'cause he'll be back for sure.